Hi, welcome. My name is Chris Orwig. I'm a photographer, a best-selling author, and I'm on the professional photography faculty at the Brooks Institute, where we are right now. And one of the things that I love about Brooks is just being surrounded by a lot of creative work, a lot of creativity. Well, here in this episode of our series, Creative Kickstart, we're going to again pursue this question of how can we become more creative? One of the ways that I like to think about this is by thinking about this whole idea that Picasso brought up, that all kids are artists. The trouble is to remain one when you grow up. And it's really true, isn't it? You know, my wife is an elementary school teacher. When you go into her classroom, as I've done before, and if you ask those students, how many of you can draw? Every student raises their hand. Now, if I ask my students in my classroom, how many of you can draw? Maybe one, maybe two students tentatively raise their hand. And the reason is because they've added something to that question. While I asked how many of you can draw, what they added was, how many of you can draw well? And that's an interesting addition to that question, right? That happens as we grow up. We say, well, I'm not any good at drawing, I can't do that. But yes, you can draw. As kids, we're really creative. There's something like this childlike wonder, which is so just beautiful that kids have. And if you've ever been around kids, you know that's true. Going back to my wife's classroom, if I ask the students, how many of you can sing? And I've done this. They all raise their hand and they all start singing. Again, back to my classroom. Back to the adults. How many of you, as young adults, can sing? Usually no one raises their hand, yet we all can do that. So somehow we have to rediscover this childlike creativity that we once had. You know, for me, I go back to being a kid. My mom is an artist. And as a kid, one of the things that my mom taught me is that there's no such thing as bad art. Now, as an adult, I know that that is a complete lie. Yet it's a lie that somehow has become a truth for me. Let me explain. What I mean is that what I think she was saying is that there's no such thing as bad art, that it's okay to experiment. If she brought home a pottery wheel so we could build ceramics or do ceramics, it's okay if it doesn't turn out perfect. It's the process, it's the experience. That's what art, that's what creativity is all about. And now as a photographer, for me, that's incredibly important. There's no such thing as a, quote, bad photograph. Now, of course there is. But what that message reminds me is that it's okay to experiment. It's okay if it doesn't turn out right. And many times, it's the best photographs that are the result of making those mistakes. You take that one frame, that's not good. But rather than beating yourself up over it and saying, well, I'm no good, putting down the camera, I'm done, you say, okay, that's not good, but there's a good frame here. What about that? What about this? Oh, right there, that's it. And so as photographers, as people who want to be more creative, we have to somehow rediscover this innocence, this childlike wonder that we once had. Remember what Picasso said, all kids are artists. The trouble is to remain one when we grow up. So in this series, one of the things that I like to do is to try to bring up some questions for discussion. If we were in a classroom, I would say, well, turn to someone sitting next to you and ask them about someone that they know. Do you know someone who has that childlike curiosity and creativity, who's really a creative and interesting person? Well, what is it about that person that makes their creativity so fascinating? How is it that they create? What do they do? What are they like? Next, an action step. How can we become more childlike in our own creative process? How can we become more curious? How can we open up our eyes in wide-eyed wonder? Well, one of the ways I think we can do that is by letting go of some of our qualitative additional words to these questions. Can you draw? Can you draw well? Drop the can you draw well? Can I draw? Sure. Why not draw a picture? Why not have fun with that? Why not let yourself make some mistakes? And by doing that often, this will help you create something that's that much more interesting and compelling and full of life. Well, in closing, I hope that you gained a bit of insight and inspiration in this Creative Kickstart. Thanks for joining me in this episode. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye for now.